This lecture discusses occupational experiential learning credit. It also explains the supporting documentation required to validate a request for credit based on occupational experience. Before we begin, let's review information about your work specialization. The information on the next few slides should look familiar to you. We discussed this during the ELFH 300 introduction lecture at the beginning of the semester. What counts for credit in the specialization area? The work specialization section of your bachelor's program evaluates learning in a work specialization or teachable occupation. Learning may be from actual college courses or from work-related courses and experience. The important factor is that the learning is both credit-worthy and college level, meaning that the level of learning is similar to a college-level course. ELFH 290 and ELFH 390 course numbers are used for courses that may not have been accepted by U of L or were taken through a non-academic organization. This includes formal training programs in organizations such as military and corporate, courses from non-accredited career schools, and no-rule courses on your transfer evaluation. Courses can be verified by work training transcripts or other documents. This is occupational training learning credit. ELFH 291 and ELFH 391 course numbers are used for learning you received via a supervisor or through self-study. This is learning that might result in licenses or certifications issued by professional and government agencies. This is the most difficult to verify and requires documents such as performance evaluations and supervisor letters. This is occupational experiential learning credit. The Prior Learning Assessment Documents, or PLAD, represents your request for 6 to 48 hours of work specialization credit based on learning from occupational training or experience. Each student must have a PLAD, and each student must have between 6 and 48 hours of work specialization credit. These hours can come from any combination of the types we'll discuss in the coming weeks. In this lesson, we'll discuss occupational experiential learning credit. The University of Louisville requires 123 credit hours to earn a bachelor's degree. 50, or 50 of those hours, must be at the upper level, that is 300 and 400 level, and 30 of the last 36 must be at U of L. However, this doesn't apply if you don't live in the Louisville area, so be sure to ask the program advisor if you have any questions. The ELFH major courses total 35 upper level credits. The general education requirement consists of 34 lower level credits in specified areas. Prior learning assessment is a way to obtain up to 48 hours of credit in the work specialization. By doing a little math, you can see that it takes 15 credits of upper level and 33 lower level to achieve the total. That leaves 6 credit hours to earn in the elective category. Your work specialization is the area of expertise that you've developed over your years in the workforce. In most cases, it's the area in which you hope to teach, train, coach, mentor, manage, or lead after graduation. Over the past few weeks, we explored ONET Online to help determine the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs, that comprise your work specialization. Then we completed the hallmark assessment for this course, the KSA Inventory and Life Learning Narrative. This detailed your development in your work specialization, and it set the baseline for your request of 6 to 48 hours of work specialization credit. As we've said before, Each student in the OLL program must have between 6 and 48 hours of work specialization credit as part of his or her graduation requirements. These hours can come from any combination of the two types we'll discuss in class. In the previous lesson, we talked in detail about occupational training learning credit. In this lesson, we'll talk about occupational experiential learning credit. Occupational experiential learning credit comes from licenses or certifications related to your work specialization, as well as supervisor-led or self-study programs. In other words, this type of credit can come from the learning you acquired during your day-to-day work activities. Supporting documentation for this request is the Occupational Experiential Learning Worksheet, accompanying reflection essays, proof of experience, and a credit recommendation. We'll talk in detail about each of these in the upcoming slides. Let's step back a minute and talk about credit policies. We're asking the university to grant additional credit based on learning from occupational training or experiences, so it's important to know about the policies associated with this type of credit. When it comes to validating and evaluating prior work learning for college credit, you should know that these policies are derived from publications from the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning. First, it's recognized that college-level learning occurs outside the college setting. Therefore, credit may be earned for documented learning from experience, but it's not given on the basis of experience alone. The college credit awarded in this program for the work specialization credit can be no more than 48 hours. Learning is documented through the PLAD, which includes specific forms, structured essays, appropriate documentation, and any other material requested by the PLA Review Committee. Students should be aware that such credits will probably not transfer to other institutions. Not all institutions recognize prior learning credit, and they might not transfer this type of credit to their school. There are different ways to understand the assessment of prior learning and the portfolio development process. This course provides the guidelines accepted by U of L. In other words, if you choose to leave U of L before graduation, another institution will likely not accept the credits awarded to you through the PLAD. Occupational experiential learning credit is more difficult to validate and evaluate. It may come from licenses or certifications, from supervisor-led or self-study programs, or from specialized occupational experience itself. ONET can help to prove your claim for college credit. A major value of ONET job descriptions is the analysis of work activities and the articulation of competencies that make up a job. The work activities listed in ONET can serve as a starting point for your request of occupational experiential learning credit. The drawback is that ONET does not identify college-level credit or value for the knowledge, skills, and competencies identified. So start with ONET to identify terms for further search, and use these terms to search the ACE Guide documentation, or use ONET itself to help validate your request for credit using the syllabus for ELFH 291-391. First, you'll use the Occupational Experiential Learning Worksheet to list the experiences you'd like considered for this type of credit. Then, your PLAD will include a reflection essay, structured using the Kolb Experiential Learning Cycle, for each entry on the worksheet. For this lesson, you'll submit just one of these reflection essays to your instructor for review. However, remember that your PLAD will include one essay for each entry on the worksheet. You'll also need to include proof of your work experience. This could be a certificate or copies of performance evaluations or a letter from your HR department or supervisor. Finally, you'll need to include validation of the amount and level of credit requested. Don't worry, we'll talk about each of these pieces of documentation in the coming slides. Download the Occupational Experiential Learning Worksheet from the Lecture and Handouts section. Begin by entering your name, student ID, and the current date at the top of the form. In the far left column labeled Work Activity, list your work experience. In this example, Mary served in the U.S. Army as a 75C, or Personnel Management Specialist. She was also a customer service representative in the civilian world. The Dates and Hours column lists the dates of her work experience. Next, she listed the name of her employer and her job title in the middle column. In the column labeled Supporting Documents, she listed which documents would validate her request. For example, Mary will use her JST, formerly known as ARTS, and the ACE Military Guide to validate her request of 21 lower-level credits from her occupational experience in the Army. Remember that you must have documentation of your work experience as well as validation of the credit request. Finally, in the far right column, include the credit request, both the number of hours and the level of the request. Total your request on the bottom line. If additional rows are needed, simply add them to the form. Next, download the Reflection Essay template from the Lecture and Handouts section of Blackboard. At the top of the form, ensure that the information exactly matches that which is listed on your Occupational Experiential Learning Worksheet. Include a description of the experience. This can come directly from your job description or from ONET. Finally, justify your request with a reflection essay. The length of your reflection essay will depend upon the amount of credit requested. In general, the review committee will expect to see a reflection essay that is at least 1 page in length for each credit hour requested. As noted on both the Occupational Experiential Learning Worksheet and the bottom of this reflection essay, Mary is requesting 21 hours of lower-level credit for learning gained as a Personnel Management Specialist in the U.S. Army. So her reflection essay will need to be at least 21 pages, double-spaced, in length. Structure your essay using the Kolb Experiential Learning Cycle, just as you have done on previous essays this semester. Use headings for each step of the cycle, and remember that the last 2 steps, abstract conceptualization and active experimentation, should comprise at least half the length of your essay. Now let's discuss the supporting documentation that is required for your request of Occupational Experiential Learning credit. First, you'll need to include proof of your work experience. This could be a performance evaluation or even a letter from your HR department or your supervisor. If you've served in the military, this could also be a JST or a DD Form 214. In some cases, this could be a copy of a book you've written, a pamphlet you've drafted, or some other proof of your work experience. The documentation does not need to be lengthy. However, it must be written on official letterhead, include a signature, and include contact information for the author of the letter. It should also include your name, the position you've held, the length of time in the position, and an assessment of your level of performance. ONET can validate the KSAs associated with the position, so the KSAs do not need to be included in any letter of supporting documentation. Additionally, you'll need to include validation of your credit request. In many cases, we can use the ACE guide as support. The ACE guides are available on the internet and contain credit recommendations for occupations, offered by both the armed services and the civilian workforce. See the lesson plan for web links to the ACE National Guide to College Credit for Workforce Training and the ACE Guide to Education Experiences in the Armed Services. If you're unable to find your work experience in the ACE Guide, we can use the syllabus for ELFH 291-391 as our guide. This syllabus states that 1 year of full-time work experience, approximately 2,000 hours, is eligible for a maximum of 4 credit hours. Both the level of credit and the amount of credit are determined by the job zone listed in ONET. Job zones 1 through 3 are eligible for 2 lower-level credit hours per year of full-time work experience. Job zones 4 and 5 are eligible for 4 upper-level credit hours per year of full-time work experience. For example, Mary's occupational experience as a customer service representative would be eligible for a maximum of 2 lower-level credits per year, because ONET indicates that customer service representative is a job zone 2. As we said earlier, the work activities listed in ONET can serve as a basis for your request of credit. Regardless of the source of your credit recommendation, either the ACE Guide or the syllabus, pay close attention to the minimum and maximum number of credit hours granted through occupational experiential learning credit. These are listed in the syllabus for ELFH 291-391. Lower level credit, or ELFH 291, can be granted at a minimum of 2 credit hours and a maximum of 42. Upper level credit, or ELFH 391, can be granted at a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 18 credit hours. At this point, you should now be fairly familiar with occupational experiential learning credit and the types of documentation needed for its request. This type of credit comes from your work experience. Your request must be supported by proof of your experience and a validation of the amount of credit requested. You'll list the sources of your credit on the Occupational Experiential Learning worksheet and complete a reflection essay for each entry on the worksheet. As a reminder, if you won't be requesting any of this type of credit, simply submit both assignments, the Occupational Experiential Learning worksheet and the reflection essay, as not applicable. Don't worry, you'll still earn credit for these assignments.